All right, so we are going to be doing the sphere activity portion of our note catcher. What we're going to be doing here is we are going to be taking these circles that I have already printed out for y'all, and we are going to be turning them into 3D forms. In this case, we're going to be making spheres, okay? Before we dive into how to turn this circle into a sphere, I wanted to give a little bit of background. I know that I have this visual right here, but I realized that it printed out a little bit small, so I wanted to give y'all a little bit more background before we just jump into making this circle into a sphere. So this is my sketch that I made, and it has the same exact concepts that we have on this small visual right here, but just made a little bit bigger so that we can really see what I'm talking about here, okay? So when we are making a sphere, we can break it down into 5 different sections, 5 different areas where we're changing the value, okay? So we start with the highlight. This is where the light is touching the sphere the most. And so it is the lightest area on our sphere. This is usually white in the very center, and then we add some of that second value that we had on our value scales just to add a little bit more dimension as we go outward. But for the most part, this section is white, okay? The next section going down, and we kind of break this down into like, I don't know, I kind of think of them as crescent moons. So we've got, well, that's not a crescent moon, but we've got the highlight, and then right here I think of as a crescent moon kind of shape. This crescent moon section, this portion of our sphere, is called the midtone. So we are using our middle values to create the midtone of our sphere. And this is where the light is hitting the sphere, but not as directly as on our highlight, okay? So midtone, mid-ground values, middle values. Then we get into our core shadow, and you can't really see that with my pencil, but you get the idea. It's another crescent moon, okay? The core shadow is going to be the darkest values, so think the value all the way on the right of your value scale, and then moving a little bit towards the left as well. You're using those darkest values to create your core shadow. You're still transitioning these values. You can see that I blended them as I went, but the idea is that we can break it down into these key areas so we know how to start sketching this out, okay? The reflected light is a little bit weird, but when we look at a sphere sitting on a table, we notice that there's a little bit of light that does end up getting reflected onto the table and bouncing back onto the sphere. And we call this reflected light. So towards the very, very base of our sphere, the value gets lighter again. I would think that this is kind of in between our midtones and our highlights. We're going a little bit lighter, okay? Once we have our sphere done, we are going to create our cast shadow. Cast shadow is a similar mid-tone area, and this is the shadow that is created from the light that the sphere is blocking. So this is usually kind of an oval, and again, the highlight and the shadow are going to be positioned differently depending on where your light source is, but this is just a really simple example. Highlight is here, therefore the cast shadow is going to be on the other side of the sphere. We make an oval, and it's a mid-tone value. So that is the breaking down of our sphere. And you'll notice that on our first circle for shading, I have added those different sections for you. So we've got our highlight. I'm going to go into my midtone and start here. And you want this value to be similar to the value that is in the middle of your value scale on your other page in your sketchbook. And I am working in kind of a crescent moon shape here. Going lighter as I get towards the highlight. If you want to, you can use your finger to blend values together a little bit to make that gradient. It does leave your fingers kind of messy, but it comes off easily with soap and water. So I've got my mid-tone pretty well placed, and I've got my highlight. And again, I'm using the first lightest value, which is white, and the second lightest value to kind of transition out so it's not too harsh, okay? And now I'm gonna go to my core shadow, and remember that is our darkest value. So I'm really going to press down with my pencil, adding pressure so that I can create a really, really dark shaded area right here in the core shadow. And it kind of swoops up a little bit. Maybe not quite as much as I did, but you get the idea. And I'm going to blend that into my mid-tone. Okay, and then I'm going to add that reflected light. And remember, that is lighter than our core shadow because this is kind of where the light might be reflecting off of the table onto the sphere. It's looking a little choppy here, and that's because we used those guides, those lines that I had here. But as you blend things out, you'll start to see it become more and more of a form, a 3D object, and less of a shape or a 2D object. Okay, I'm gonna say that that's pretty good. I might go back in and blend things in a little bit, but I wanna show you what that last step is. So we are going to complete our core shadow. And remember, I said that our cast shadow, my apologies, our cast shadow is going to be made up of the same values as our mid-tone. And we're going to kind of blend it out so it gets lighter as it goes outwards. You'll notice that that is something we can see in shadows normally. Just like that. So, I don't love how these are blending. I might add a little bit more there. There we go. That looks better. So I've got my highlight, I've got my mid-tone, I've got my core shadow, I've got my reflected light, and I've got my cast shadow, okay? We are going to be doing the same thing for cross-hatching in a little bit.